I'm going to talk today about preparing your casting slip for pouring and then how to pour a mold. So the first thing is you want to always stir your casting slip in the bucket, even if you know it's in pretty good condition, because you don't want to be getting like a thin film on the of water on the top of your bucket of casting slip. So you want to have a mixer. In the studio, the slip and glaze mixers are underneath one of the sinks in the glaze room. So stick it in. You can sort of see how this has this layer of water that's kind of cream colored, whereas the slip itself is sort of gray. One of the things you need to be very careful about with casting slip is not making a mess on the floor. So notice how I mixed my slip very close to where I was going to put my mixer after I was done, so I wouldn't drip all over the floor. So when I'm going to pour a mold, I want to have a pitcher where I'll put my casting slip in and a container that I'll actually leave in the bucket, because look how drippy it is. I don't want to get this all over the floor as I move this container over to my mold. So I'll just use it to fill the pitcher, and then I'll leave it in the bucket and put the lid back on, because I don't want to dry out my casting slip before I'm done using the majority of the bucket. So over here, I have a couple molds. This is the one I'm about to cast. The first thing you want to do is to clean it ever so lightly with a damp sponge. Especially around this area here where it's going to meet the other side of a two-part mold, because if there's any clay residue there, it won't have a really tight fit and you'll get a little lip of casting slip where you don't want it, and your mold seam will be too prominent. So wipe it all out, and then I'll put the two parts together. So the next thing you have to do is decide how you're going to secure your two sides together. A very common method is just using these inner tubes that from an old bike that have been cut down the multiple times lengthwise, and then you can tie them to fit your mold as needed. And I would put one on that side and one on this side. Another good way to secure a mold is with these straps. We have some in the studio. They are good for, especially for bigger molds where you have a lot of volume of casting slip inside, and that means that you will get a lot of pressure that's going to make the mold want to come apart and spill all over. So these are especially good for when you're casting a large volume. It's not necessary for this size of mold, but I'll leave it on. And then the third way that you can secure a mold is using a clamp such as this. This clamp, I think this mold is not very, very thick, and I think it would be very risky. So what's risky about this method is that if I squeeze this too hard, I'm gonna just crack my mold, because plaster is very brittle and will break easily. So I would only use this if I have a mold where I think there's a risk of it popping apart because of the large volume of slip. If I think that's really great, then I might do this. But remember, I'm not cranking this down hard. I'm just turning it till there's just ever so slight resistance. I'm not going to do that though, because I don't think it's necessary for this mold, and I'll just And really only one of these two methods is necessary. I'm going to leave them both on just because that's how I started today. That's what we're doing today. For the how I'm going to cast this is a method where you actually use a funnel to help you get plenty of casting slip in a small opening. So I'll just push this in the hole lightly because I don't want to knock off a bunch of plaster into my mold when I do that. And then take a little coil of clay and secure it. If it seems like that clay is not wanting to stay because your mold is very dried out, don't hesitate to use a wet sponge to help secure it. And now I'm ready to pour this mold. So it's quite a bit of volume. The nice thing about having the funnel is my pouring is just a little bit more smooth. And you never want to stop pouring when you're pouring your mold, because once you stop, even for just like 10-15 seconds, and then start pouring more to finish it, you're going to get a line, an indentation in your casting that is pretty difficult to get rid of. So you want to make sure you have plenty of casting slip in your pitcher, and then as you're pouring, you don't want to stop. Will you shoot into the... Okay, so you can see I have a little extra casting slip that's coming up into the funnel, and that is good because as the mold starts setting up and getting its walls hard, where that volume's gonna go down, and I want to keep the volume topped off at least at the level of the plaster mold, so that I don't have thinner walls towards the top and thicker walls toward the bottom. And so the next thing that's I want to make sure I do on this mold is, because I have the pour spout on a very flat surface of the positive. So when that's the case, I'm very likely to get an air pocket where my casting slip didn't fill, and it will just be an empty spot in the mold that didn't cast. So I do want to kind of move the mold around a little and make sure I, leave an opportunity for an air pocket, or like a bubble, to come up through the casting slip and into the funnel, so that I don't have to have a bad casting for this one. Okay, thank you. That's casting your mold and securing it with straps.